London Real, sponsored by Bulletproof Coffee.
I get into Ironman, and so I'm out there. It's surreal. Like I'm treading water. I have no clue what my body's capable of at this point. And so I'm out there treading water, and I didn't have a triathlon bike, right? So I shipped all the little parts that were in a box in my garage down to Hawaii to my team that was down there, Team Timex, and they have like a tent set up and like a bike shop and a bike mechanic. So they built me a bike and gave me a bike basically the day before the race.
Okay.
And
which isn't smart.
Yeah, and any cyclists who are listening are going to kind of know this, but Tour de France cyclists, if you watch them doing like their 40K time trial, right, like Lance Armstrong on the day where they're wearing the pointy helmet and the bodysuit, and it's one guy, right, like going as fast as they can for typically it's a 40K, and they're bent way over in this super aggressive position, and their heads like literally lower than their butt, and they're bent over the bike like this, just super aggressive position. Not designed to ride 112 miles in, definitely not designed as a position to be in for a guy who hasn't been riding his bicycle. Well, that's the position that I had on the bike.
Okay.
So I just basically rode as hard as I could on the bike. I'll tell you what happened in a second. But basically the swim felt great.
Okay.
I don't know if it was the weightlifting, if it was because I'd spent barely any time in the water, but I was 5 minutes slower than what I would typically swim 2.4 miles in. So usually I'd swim like around an hour or so. I was like an hour and 5 minutes.
Okay.
So it turns out that you can swim for long periods of time just by lifting weights and then using muscle memory of having swam before.
That's interesting.
So the swim wasn't that bad. The bike, like I said, I rode 12 miles as hard as I could, then everything locked up. Back locked up, hip flexors locked, just the biomechanics were completely off. So I spent the rest of the ride just sitting up like a grandma with a pink basket on the front of my bike, literally just sitting up and riding. So my bike ride was almost an hour and a half slower than what it would normally take me to ride. And I was like stopping at aid stations and visiting with volunteers. And at one point I rode up to a volunteer aid station and was just basically chatting them up as I stretched my hip flexors so I could at least get back on my bike and pedal. And they invited me into their truck to smoke their bong, and they offered me like a little Ziploc bag full of weed before I rode off. And I'm like, they do blood testing at the finish line, and I can't do that. But it was funny to be in the world championship of our sport and get offered marijuana halfway through the bike ride.
That is funny.
And then the run wasn't that bad. I ran the marathon, but my legs were all kind of locked up from the bike ride. But ultimately, I finished it kind of in the middle of the field with almost zero amount of time spent doing actual triathlon training. And the lesson that I learned from it is that the human body is capable of these big feats of endurance without a lot of training. We are innate endurance animals, right? Like the fact that we're upright and we've got lots of surface area for cooling, the fact that we can sweat instead of pant, so we're able to cool ourselves so much more efficiently than a lot of other animals. The fact that we're intelligent enough to be able to carry fuel with us for long periods of time. The way that our butts are built, we actually get really, really good hip extension and push off the ground with each foot strike. What this comes down to is that, like, if you want to go out and run a marathon, or you want to go out and ride a bike 112 miles, you want to do anything that involves long periods of time moving, the human body is pretty good at that. What it tends to be weaker in is strength, power, injury prevention, flexibility, coordination. A lot of those things need to be trained. If you train those things, you can go out and you can do some pretty cool feats of endurance without the traditional, like an Ironman triathlete's going to, run 60 miles a week and ride their bike 200 miles a week and, swim, 4 or 5 days a week for 45 minutes to an hour. You don't have to do that stuff, right? If you just want to say, go out and do an Ironman, it turns out that if you're a relatively fit person, you can just go out and do one.
Okay. That's a good observation.
Your body will keep going.
That's interesting. This week on London Real, we have movement artist Ido Portal.
So people think it's about handstands and, jumping on the rings and doing flips or whatever, when actually our work is way, way beyond that. It's a completely different and a huge paradigm shift in the way that you think about your practice and your movement and your body. We all have a body and we all move. We have no choice. The only question is, how well are you doing it? And most people just don't have the user manual for their own machinery. Changing your dogma takes guts. I don't believe in planning. I believe in reacting. I'm not the messiah. I'm a thinker. I'm a teacher. I'm a mover. I'm being Ido. I'm just trying to handle myself in that way and be genuine.
On Sunday, London Real presents Ido Portal. Just move.
Walk beside me. Don't walk behind me.